If Death Note is considered the pinnacle in the realm of supernatural thrillers, then this anime is undoubtedly a portrayal of the apex of capitalism. Even 10 years later, its innovative setting remains cutting edge. The man was a second-generation rich man, but now he's ended up losing his family's money. Despite maxing out dozens of credit cards, he cannot withdraw a single penny. Trembling, he pulls out the last remaining card from his wallet, a black card that draws on his future credit. As the black card is inserted into the ATM, the screen suddenly goes black. A string of strange codes appears, prompting the man to enter his password. Desperate to survive, he instantly types in 3 6s. The machine then asks if he wishes to initiate the transaction. As he confirms, his eyes turn a golden yellow. He then heads to the parking lot, where, after flashing the black card, a Xiaomi SU7 instantly appears before him. The car door slowly opens, and without hesitation, he gets in. When the driver learns that the man's destination is all wrong street, he presses the accelerator, and the car speeds forward. Pulling a special lever, the vehicle flashes and miraculously passes through a wall, entering a bizarre world. This is Financial Street, a place where ordinary people can leapfrog social classes. The only requirement is to overdraw from their future. However, the man's luck seems to be running low as he immediately encounters a top tycoon, Mikuni. Mikuni, intending to intimidate him into retreat, casually summons Kakazuzu. But the man, undeterred, summons Wasp Woman to challenge Mikuni head-on. He naively believes that winning is merely a matter of probability. In the next second, a green dial appears on the man's body, and the two combatants collide mid-air, marking the beginning of the battle. Yet, this match was doomed from the start. Wasp Woman's full-strength attack is easily blocked, and the man decides to go all in, betting all his assets. He conjures a lightsaber and charges at the opponent, but it's effortlessly blocked by a werewolf. In the face of such overwhelming power, defeating him is merely a flick of the wrist. In just 2.5 seconds, Mikuni easily takes all of the man's assets. With Wasp Woman's demise, the man's defeat is sealed. He is pierced by Mikuni's red arrow, turning him into a complete debtor. Disheartened, he heads to the subway station, intending to end his life by lying on the tracks. Yoga, also on this train, is a penniless orphan who has lived a tough life from a young age. He only dares to eat the cheapest ramen and works 2 jobs just to scrape together his tuition fees. When classmates invite him out, he always declines, citing other commitments. His account doesn't even hold 10,000 yen. Since he is impoverished, even the girl he loves is taken away by a rich second generation. Seeing the girl's smiling profile and their close bond, Yoga feels utterly miserable, to the point of collapsing from exhaustion after studying as soon as he gets home. His only hobby? Studying for the civil service exam. The next day, he was awakened by the sound of knocking on the door. Upon opening it, he was greeted by a person dressed in bizarre attire, who claimed to be an employee of the Bank of Midas. However, finance had nothing to do with him. It was as distant as could be. Without another thought, he simply shut the door. But the next second, the man mysteriously appeared inside Yoga's home. He asked Yoga if he wanted to make money more efficiently, but Yoga had no interest in wasting words with him. He immediately drove the man out, but when he opened his eyes again, he found himself pulled into a mysterious space. The man explained that everything here was unrelated to the original world and promised to return Yoga after some education. His purpose was to invite Yoga to participate in an event at All Wrong Street, and Yoga was the chosen entrepreneur. However, Yoga was uninterested in such impractical matters, preferring to focus on his upcoming exam, and found the whole situation too complicated to grasp. Despite his outward refusal, he was somewhat intrigued. When he woke up again, the strange man was gone. The next day, as usual, he went to withdraw money, only to find an extra 500,000 yen had mysteriously appeared in his account. After a day of deliberation, Yoga withdrew 10,000 yen. Just as he was about to take out the bill, the strange man reappeared before him. It turned out that this was all his scheme, and the 500,000 yen was a deposit for Yoga's participation. Initially, Yoga found it hard to accept and wanted to confront the man physically. However, the man then produced a black card. Looking at the black card in front of him, Yoga's movements were instantly frozen. This card was an invitation to Financial Street, allowing not only free entry and exit, but also withdrawals from any ATM, using Yoga's future as collateral. Dizzy from the turn of events, Yoga saw a young girl calling out to him. As he regained his senses, he found himself on a vehicle headed to Financial Street. The girl was using counterfeit bills that looked real to the shop owner, and these fakes were quickly flooding the market undetected. Only Yoga noticed something was amiss. Out of kindness, he never gave exact change when making change, which enraged the fat man in front of him. What he didn't know was that Yoga's actions saved him, as this was a bizarre currency that consumed the future, only recognizable by those who frequented Financial Street, and Yoga was now one of them. Just 2.5 days earlier, Yoga had been invited to Financial Street. Looking at this bizarre world, he was instantly filled with curiosity. The suited man took the opportunity to explain that these strange creatures were the personal assets of the entrepreneurs, aiding them during transactions. According to the rules, the entrepreneurs had to participate in a transaction called a deal every week, and Yoga's debut quickly caught the attention of the big shots. They gambled on Yoga's success or failure to determine if he would become the strongest newcomer. Unfortunately, Yoga's assets were immediately slashed by the fat man across from him. Although he managed to block the attack, Yoga's meager assets were rapidly depleting. Seeing Yoga easily dodge his attack, the fat man immediately called on his asset to use a little money magic. In the next second, a bunch of iron balls came smashing towards Yoga. Although Mashu blocked them, Yoga was clearly not in good shape. Looking at Yoga, who was stunned and confused, Mashu was incredibly frustrated. She was severely injured by the opponent's minor economic magic. Her arm had already been battered bloody by the fat man's iron balls. Seeing the severely injured Mashu, Yoga was suddenly thrown into a panic. However, Mashu told Yoga to ignore her and to run for his life because as long as Yoga was unhurt, there was still a chance to win. The seasoned fat man pursued his advantage, and the next second, his sharp sword slashed towards Mashu. Not only did Mashu suffer a severe bleeding injury, but Yoga was also hurt for not being able to defend properly. This meant that Yoga's assets suffered substantial losses. Fortunately, while the fat man was still regretting, Mashu managed to carry Yoga and flew away. Hence, the fat man planned to use a 3 million small magic spell to quickly finish off Yoga. Since Mashu was severely injured in the recent fight and could heal herself, Yoga still felt remorse. Listening to Yoga's heartfelt words warmed Mashu's heart a bit, although it was a bit strange. But Yoga believed that caring for an injured person was the right thing to do. Seeing that his partner was still confused, Mashu explained to Yoga that injuries meant a reduction in assets, while successful attacks would yield profits. These were the rules of the duel. Yoga wanted Mashu to guide him, but before they could act, the opponent's attack targeted Yoga, and this time it was more severe. A huge iron ball crushed Mashu's legs, and combined with her previous unrecovered injuries, Yoga was completely trapped. The fat man was already behind Yoga, planning to finish him off in one blow. Suddenly, the fat man unleashed a 5 million small magic spell, and the next second, his assets conjured a giant iron ball that came crashing towards Yoga. Seeing this, Mashu quickly told Yoga to flip a card and use mid-level economic magic. As the card flipped, a 10 million small magic spell was released. Mashu's body emitted a burst of golden light, not only instantly healing her injuries, but also giving her much more confidence against the giant iron ball flying towards them. Mashu unleashed a burning heat, and in a second, countless fire serpents attacked the giant iron ball in the air. Yoga's attacks soon swept across the entire arena, astonishing all the bigwigs present. In the end, not only did Yoga win the duel, but he even caused the arena to collapse, making him the final victor. After Mashu returned to her card, Yoga collapsed from exhaustion. When Yoga woke up again, the man in the suit reminded him that although the assets could be used freely, as a price, he had to participate in a trade every week, and he must never think of stopping the duels. Only declaring bankruptcy could end it, but it would also lead to being expelled from Financial Street, meaning bankruptcy in the real world as well. At that moment, Yoga hadn't fully realized any change. When Yoga again approached the ATM, he had already joined the ranks of millionaires with 33.5 million yen, and his fate would change from then on. Not only was he not focusing on preparing for the civil service exams in class, but even his meals reached the highest quality. Meanwhile, Mikuni had just accessed Yoga's personal information. He was greatly interested in this young man who shared similar experiences to his own. Although Yoga had already become a millionaire, he had not given up his job at the convenience store. However, he then encountered a peculiar incident. A girl blatantly used counterfeit money, which Yoga immediately recognized. Rather than panicking, the girl impatiently summoned the manager. Strangely enough, what were clearly black toy paper bills appeared as real money to the manager. At this moment, Yoga realized that he seemed to be the only one able to recognize these bills, which were all originating from Financial District. Following this, Yoga started receiving more counterfeit bills. In order to prevent these counterfeit notes from circulating further, Yoga always made a point to give out normal currency as change to customers. However, this also led to dissatisfaction among customers. Even though there were many full bills in the register, just when one customer was about to vent his anger at Yoga, a man nearby pulled out a 20,000 bill and told him to leave quickly. This man was Mikuni, a big shot from the Financial District. After learning about the black money from him, Yoga instantly recognized Mikuni's true identity. Mikuni immediately praised Yoga for his trading the previous day and assured him that he meant no harm. Yoga even learned about his father's whereabouts from him. Mikuni encouraged Yoga not to run away and to explore his own possibilities, promising to help him if he was interested. Mikuni then left with a flourish, all of which was observed by a white-haired woman. Just yesterday, Yoga had received news of his father through Mikuni. In search of the reasons behind his father's disappearance, Yoga returned to his old home for the first time in 2.5 years. Although he didn't find any useful information from his aunt, he stumbled upon a diary in the old warehouse. Strangely enough, it was filled with dense numbers and even bore the Bank of Midas logo, confirming for Yoga that his father's disappearance was connected to the Financial District. He hurried to the Financial District to find Masakaki, seeking information about his father, knowing well that his involvement in the Financial District was related to his father. However, how could Yoga, a mere high school student, outsmart a cunning old fox? Fortunately, Mikuni arrived just in time to help. He took Yoga to an information broker who naturally had information about Yoga's father. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and after a look from Mikuni, the man understood what was expected. Mikuni then paid the broker a full $1 million, after which he was willing to speak. He described Yoga's father as a passionate trader and an impressive entrepreneur who, unfortunately, lost everything in a trade and was banished by the Financial District. His ultimate fate was a long pole in the park. Because his identity was unclear, the government handled his remains. As for his personality, he was described as someone drawn to money, always wanting to turn 1,000 into 10,000, a true miser, just like your father. After learning about his father's past, Yoga felt a profound sense of abandonment. But Mikuni, speaking from his own experience as someone whose father was also a miser, comforted him. When he was very young, his family experienced a financial crisis. His sister contracted an incurable disease, which could have been treated with money. However, his father invested all the family's money into his company. As a result, the company grew, but his sister could not be saved. In order to retaliate against his father, Mikuni used his first earnings from here to forcefully take over his father's company, leaving him with nothing. Yet Yoga did not resent his father's mysterious disappearance. He was upset that his father's journal contained no mention of him or his mother. But Mikuni believed that this was a grave mistake. His own father had only ever earned money for money's sake, whereas Yoga's father earned money for his family. In this regard, Yoga could not match his father because money is most honorable when it is used not for oneself but for others. Mikuni's words completely awakened Yoga. He encouraged Yoga to find what was truly important to him, and, since there was still some time before the next trade, he suggested that Yoga think it over. With that, Mikuni left alone. As Yoga looked at the somewhat unfamiliar photo of his father, he seemed lost in thought. On the road, Q was surprised that Mikuni did not persuade Yoga to join the commercial guild, but clearly Mikuni had his own plans. Their conversation was overheard by a mysterious woman, a spy sent by an organization to keep an eye on Mikuni. Mikuni was not just an ordinary investor. Owning hundreds of billions in assets, he controlled the nation's economic lifelines. His true identity was complex and elusive. Soon, Yoga faced his first particularly challenging enemy, his teacher, whose palms suddenly grew eyes. His skull flipped open in an instant, and bizarrely, his stomach turned into a void from which a girl emerged. In the next second, she flew towards the barrier behind the old man, then stared wide-eyed, absorbing his energy. Subsequently, the barrier instantly collapsed, signaling the destruction of the old man's business empire. A pharmaceutical company worth hundreds of billions was auctioned off, marking the future of financial warfare. He, too, was a participant in this. Suffering from increasing familial burdens and scant income, he could hardly breathe under the pressure of supporting 3 children. He had to win this battle. Yoga had an unforgivable reason for fighting. After using a card, the 2 opponents faced off. However, as a novice, Yoga was no match for his teacher and was quickly cornered. The teacher's preemptive strike impressed the surrounding bigwigs. By now, the teacher's business model was complete, clearly securing his victory. Black paper money continuously emerged from Yoga's body, reducing his assets without the need for physical action. At that moment, Yoga's card issued a warning, but fortunately, he had a backup plan. After selling off Mashu's stocks, with Mikuni's help, Yoga gained the capital to start over. In a second, by using a medium-strength economic spell, he achieved a comeback against the odds. Accompanied by the massive destruction caused by searing heat, Yoga ultimately won, while the teacher instantly lost his future. He found it hard to accept that he had lost just like that. After all, no matter how he thought about it, he was supposed to win. But the rules of the game were set by Financial District. Since the timely sale of stocks was an irreproachable business act, the ultimate consequence was always being banished by Financial District. At this point, Mashu explained to Yoga that one must always have 10 shares of stock on hand, out of which 9 could undoubtedly be sold for money. After the battle, Yoga sincerely expressed his gratitude towards Mikuni, but Mikuni stated that he only wanted to invest in him. After all, if the situation were allowed to worsen, Yoga would undoubtedly go bankrupt, and Mikuni was only interested in buying the stocks Yoga sold. Mikuni stated that they each got what they needed from each other, and no debts remained. After leaving Financial District, Yoga was very curious about what bankruptcy entailed. The driver told him that different people face different outcomes. This instantly made Yoga think of his father, who had committed suicide. Wondering if his teacher might face the same fate, he was surprised to see the teacher appear unharmed in class the next day, as if nothing had happened. Yoga was very puzzled, so after class, he hurriedly found the teacher and sincerely apologized. The teacher showed no change in expression upon seeing Yoga and asked him to come to his house in the afternoon. However, little did he know, this deep interaction would redefine his understanding of the future. Upon arriving at the teacher's house, Yoga noticed a strange phenomenon. Even though his children were right beside him, the teacher pretended not to see them. Moreover, even his wife, who was supposedly 10 months pregnant, showed no sign of a belly, and he even claimed that they had no children. "We don't have children," he said, representing the future he had lost. While Financial District's intervention had solved his immediate financial crisis, it had also cost him his family. When he asked Yoga what his aspirations were, Yoga replied that he did not know. This instantly made the teacher feel like a clown, an economics professor defeated by a purposeless young man. Despite having connections like Mikuni, he did not know what he was fighting for. The teacher said he had never deeply felt the concept of the future until he went bankrupt, and it was too late. His future was his cherished family, but now everything about his children had disappeared, as if they had never existed. Only memories flowed down. And this was like the world changing imperceptibly. The teacher said he did not know what Yoga's father had lost, but Yoga being able to speak freely here was already very fortunate. At this moment, Yoga sincerely apologized to the teacher again, but the teacher said there was no need. After all, if he had won, then conversely, Yoga would have lost something. But this made Yoga feel very conflicted, as suffering, whether his own or that of others, was torturous for him. For this reason, he hoped Yoga would join Mikuni's guild. Although it would not make much money, it would ensure that he would not go bankrupt, which was the outcome he faced for refusing to join. Then, as the two walked beside a moving train, the teacher expressed that he did not hate Yoga. After all, he had initiated the trade. Conversely, he hoped Yoga would not lose because now only Yoga could share memories of his children with him. However, at this point, the Financial District seemed to have reached its limit. Although Mikuni was maintaining peace and stability between here and the real world in his own way, there were always groups of people who hindered his progress. For example, the old man in front of him. Since the old man did not plan to join his guild, Mikuni naturally needed to clear the stumbling blocks in his path. Accompanied by the clash of the two strongest economies, both sides launched their offensives instantly. Although the old man could teleport at will, this was a mere trifle for Mikuni. The two were evenly matched. But as the old man sold his stocks, he suddenly surged ahead, reaching more than double Mikuni's value. The transaction amount even reached a staggering 369 billion. Just as the old man was about to deliver a fatal blow to Mikuni, he was unexpectedly outmaneuvered by Mikuni, who performed a countermove. Just when Mikuni thought he had won, he unknowingly fell into the old man's trap. Due to the terrifying backlash of a hostile takeover, Mikuni suffered heavy losses. As Mikuni's assets rapidly depleted and time ticked away, he was forced to use his last resort. Suddenly, the demon's palm grew 2 eyes, and then its skull flipped open. Even more bizarre, his stomach turned into a void from which a girl emerged, who was Mikuni's trump card. While she was absorbing energy from the main body, Q supported from behind. It wasn't long before the old man's barrier collapsed and the situation reversed, allowing Mikuni to win the match. However, the old man did not go bankrupt, and this was what Mikuni wanted to show Yoga. Although Yoga acknowledged it was a formidable feat, Mikuni could not see any admiration in his eyes, because he did not want to become a person like Mikuni. Perhaps at that moment, the differences in their beliefs became apparent. Yoga stated he did not want to lose and wanted to be strong enough to control the outcomes of trades to prevent those around him from becoming unfortunate. A man was just stabbed, and yet bizarre black coins continuously flowed out of his body. It was thought that he was facing financial ruin, but strangely, even though his hands and feet were firmly locked, his opponent did not pursue the victory. In the next second, his opponent's demon was knocked back 2 meters, and unexpectedly, Yoga's reason for doing so was to save his opponent. After his duel with the teacher, Yoga deeply understood the horrors of bankruptcy and chose to become stronger without hesitation to control the outcomes of trades. However, what was supposed to be an easy victory turned into his first defeat. Fortunately, the economic loss was not enough to bankrupt him, and wins and losses were normal in the vast financial district, so Yoga did not mind it. But the driver told Yoga that even a slight loss could lead to family destruction and separation. After all, the future itself is what's at stake in these trades, and what the future holds is unclear to anyone. Hearing this, Yoga had an epiphany. Afterward, Yoga's life indeed saw subtle changes. His healthy aunt suddenly had to be hospitalized for 7 days, and he miraculously failed an exam he was sure to pass, although it did not affect his childhood friend's teaching qualification exam. However, this made him feel a bit of loss. Additionally, previous misdirections had caused some estrangement between Yoga and Mashu. Mashu expressed that although she would recover quickly, the physical pain she experienced could not be eliminated. She warned Yoga that if he intended to engage in complex combat combinations, he should discuss them with her in advance. However, their conversation was interrupted by a ringing alarm. It turned out that Yoga had previously prepared some instant noodles. After learning from Yoga that instant noodles were a good thing, Mashu expressed her desire to try them, but he thought it was strange to feed a bank card. So he said he would bring her a bowl of ramen next time, and then quickly finished eating them. Meanwhile, the old man who suffered a severe loss against Mikuni felt very unwilling to accept his defeat. In an attempt to recover his losses to the greatest extent, he engaged in transactions with others, but even the guild's efforts at mediating were ultimately futile. Perhaps this is the essence of capitalists. They never care about the impact of transactions on the real world, only the money in their pockets. However, although the old man was cunning, his opponent was not unprepared. In the eyes of the opponent, the old man's actions were in vain. With just a slight effort, the old man became disorganized, and his assets visibly flowed towards the opponent. Just when the opponent thought he had the upper hand, the old man made a full effort to counterattack. The opponent, who was focused on defense, was naturally not a match for the old man, and quickly reached the brink of bankruptcy. Black coins flew everywhere, and even though one party might luckily win, it would still result in mutual destruction. The intense scene of their transaction shocked Yoga. At the same time, the real society was also greatly impacted. Not only was corruption uncovered in his own investigations, but his pharmaceutical company's performance declined, nearing bankruptcy. A very puzzled Yuiga then consulted his teacher, who told him that the bankruptcy of the pharmaceutical company would lead to 10,000 people losing their jobs, and these 10,000 people's futures were what the old man had lost in his previous defeat. Hearing this conclusion left Yuiga extremely shocked. He could not believe the immense impact of the financial district on reality, and this was the ultimate fate of those who go bankrupt. Even though the teacher was still alive and sitting in front of Yuiga, because of his previous loss to Yuiga, not only did he no longer have his child, but his wife was gone too. This was the future he had lost. Following this, Yuiga submitted his proposal to Mashu, but it was met with strong opposition from her. In her view, Yuiga's proposal was utterly impractical. As Mikuni had said, to manipulate the outcomes of matches, one must have precise control over oneself, and Yuiga was completely unprepared. If it came to a fight, she wouldn't be able to handle it. Just then, an information broker approached Yuiga, asking if he wanted to buy information about the pharmaceutical company from him, which was exactly what Yuiga needed. After paying $1 million, the broker told Yuiga that FE Pharmaceuticals, established just 5 years ago, would fully acquire Basho Pharmaceuticals, and the owner of that company was Mikuni. This was how he minimized the impact on the real world. Later, when Yuiga confronted Mikuni, he candidly revealed his intentions. Mikuni stated that he would use the Midas coins collected by the guild to mitigate the impact of transactions, and then allow the guild to control the financial district. In this way, the impact of transactions could be more easily controlled. In his view, neither the Bank of Midas nor the financial district should exist in the first place. Yuiga despised it all, yet he was unable to prevent the flow of dark money into the market. Thus, coexistence was merely a necessary result. By minimizing the impact of transactions on reality through the guild and purchasing Japanese government bonds with Midas coins, they could prevent the nation's collapse. This was the only way to maintain the current state of the world. He argued that it was better for people to live in peace with the status quo rather than suffer in a pure world. However, Yuiga could not accept the flow of dark money into the real world. Mikuni said that one day he would understand. To further understand Mikuni's philosophy, Yuiga logged into the guild the next day for a duel, which surprised the guild members. Today's opponent was particularly tricky, not only in appearance, but also covered in tentacles. Their battle was about to begin. The man opened his fully yellow eyes and then held up his black card towards the sky. The next second, an angel appeared above him, accompanied by endlessly extending lightning. After an explosion, the girl's hands were cut in two, with black liquid continuously flowing out. Yuiga, holding the fallen girl, had tears streaming down his face. Faced with the opponent's strong economic power and formidable strength, Yuiga had no chance of winning. However, all of this pain could have been avoided. Just yesterday, Ku, tomorrow's opponent, found Yuiga and immediately complimented how well Mashu was maintained. He then directly expressed his desire for Yuiga to forfeit the duel, offering to take on half of the needed assets himself, a so-called victory without fighting. In his view, Yuiga had no chance against him. Yuiga, however, took Ku's kind advice as mockery and asked why Ku didn't forfeit voluntarily. Ku responded that the amount he would lose was too large and that it was better to offer up half of Yuiga's assets instead. He assured Yuiga that he had no ill intentions and merely wanted to have a peaceful conversation with him. As for asking the opponent to surrender, it was commonplace, but no one had accepted it until now. Yuiga retorted that this was clearly deserved, but Ko believed that maintaining balance in transactions was unavoidable in its impact on reality. Therefore, not fighting was the best solution. Seeing that Yuiga was still unmoved, Ko handed his business card to Yuiga, then swiped his black card and disappeared the next second, leaving Yuiga and Mashu bewildered. Only later did Yuiga realize that he seemed to have seen that man before. Upon recalling from a magazine, Ko's true worth as a representative of a non-profit organization was highlighted. His activities began with donating vaccines to emerging nations and spanned education and healthcare. Despite his high profile, he was never arrogant, but rather inspired a charismatic maternal stance, earning him the nickname Volunteer Prince. After work, as Yuiga walked down the street pondering why Ku acted the way he did, the next moment, a van stopped in front of him. The people even claimed that Yoga's aunt had issued a critical illness notice, and in his urgency, Yoga was duped. After he got on the car, the foreign woman laid her cards on the table immediately. She revealed that she was intimately familiar with the affairs of the financial district and was actually an undercover agent placed there by an international organization. She argued that Mikuni's approach of stabilizing the present at the expense of the future was flawed. Although Mikuni had seemingly helped thousands, the massive influx of Midas coins would ultimately deprive many more of their future. She wanted to destroy the financial district, which she described as a ticking time bomb, and for this, she sought Yoga's help. Yoga was completely unaware of all this, so the next day he sought out Kou mentioned that although the current economic situation seemed very optimistic, the continuing widening of economic disparities would gradually destroy the balance as more Midas coins flowed into the real world. The reason was the guild, where Mikuni was a member. Although controlling transactions within the guild could mitigate the impact on the real world, Mikuni's repeated actions were increasingly causing the real world to shrink. Thus, if only a future of possibilities remained, the so-called present would lose its value of existence. The financial district existed by leveraging the future as a guarantee, and the impact on the real world was something Yoga was profoundly aware of. At that moment, Kou showed Yoga something by opening a door. Behind it, the walls were covered with children's drawings, gifts from the children he had helped. Since all the drawings depicted futures, he had hung them all on the walls. However, these had changed to different pictures after his last loss, indicating that the futures painted by the children had vanished. He told Yoga that in any transaction, someone inevitably loses something. Avoiding transactions was good, but when a transaction was unavoidable, the only thing one could do was to replace the lost possibilities with other possibilities. Afterwards, Yoga approached Mikuni. Through questioning, he found out that Mikuni was the very person who had previously defeated Kou. His views were entirely the opposite. He argued that the future was merely an extension of the present. If there was no present, there would be no future either. Mikuni's statements left Yoga unsure of his next course of action. However, Mikuni only told him that as long as he was in the street, it was impossible to always run away. He urged Yoga to fight and win, which, in his view, was the way to survive in this street. The next day, Yoga chose to fight. However, faced with a significant power disparity, even his best efforts were futile. He couldn't find a way for both sides to come out unscathed, so he had to choose a direct attack, seeking a sliver of chance to defeat his opponent. The two clenched their hands together, shouting in anger. Then, using some kind of economic magic, Yoga miraculously won. Although Kou lost the match, fortunately, he didn't reach the brink of bankruptcy. He just needed to cut back on personnel and start over, relying only on donations and fundraising thereafter. The boy merely accepted a paper bill, but in the next second, it was blown away by a strong wind and turned into a counterfeit bill. He intended to pick it up immediately. However, strangely, with a flash of garbled code, the boy disappeared in an instant, and even his mother forgot his existence. This was the consequence of excessively gambling with the future. Due to investors recklessly staking their futures, Southeast Asia's economy was the first to collapse. Some countries went bankrupt and vanished from the world, creating a chain reaction that even affected Japan in reality. Not only did Akihabara, once a sacred site for anime, begin to decline, but the once vibrant campuses gradually became desolate and sad. Although Yoga noticed something was amiss, he didn't think much of it. However, on his way home later, Yoga discovered that more and more people were becoming homeless due to unemployment. The economic downturn was gradually eroding the enthusiasm of part-time workers. Although Mikuni saw all this, he still chose to continuously inject Midas coins into the market to control the economic collapse because, in his view, these were just temporary measures. Meanwhile, a teacher who could no longer bear the loss of his wife and children finally planned to jump off a building to commit suicide. Yoga, seeing the dire situation, hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. But how could he understand the feeling of losing everything? The teacher said that he thought he could redeem his wife and children by giving up all his property and research results. But all these efforts were in vain. Yoga tried to persuade the teacher to abandon this dangerous idea, but the desperate teacher still took that step. Fortunately, the next second Yoga managed to pull the teacher back. avoiding a tragedy. Yet the teacher was already burnt out and seemed like a broken man, now unable to focus on life. Seeing this, Yoga comforted him, saying not to give up and promising to find a solution in the financial district. Upon arriving in the financial district, Yoga immediately sought out Masakaki, hoping that the financial district would return the teacher's collateral and stated he would compensate the bank with assets 100 times over. However, Masakaki flatly refused him because he had no authority to interfere with higher-ups' regulations. With no other option, Yoga had to return to reality and relay the news to the teacher, only to receive news of the teacher's death in a traffic accident. This feeling of helplessness made Yoga very frustrated. While walking on the street, he encountered an information dealer who simply told Yoga that trust would bring money. After discussing credit issues with the information dealer, Yoga took the opportunity to ask about the idea of using the future as collateral for loans. The dealer said it was very simple, as money was more trustworthy than the future. At that moment, Yoga seemed to see a vision of the future, a mother holding her newborn child, discussing the child's name with the father. When he snapped back to reality, Yoga was once again in the black car, unclear about what had just happened, but it all seemed so real. His purpose for coming to the financial district this time was to burn these sinful Midas coins on the spot. He first poured all the Midas coins onto the ground, then pulled out a lighter, and with a flick, set them all ablaze. The sinful Midas coins burning in the fierce flames symbolized his guilt towards the teacher and his helplessness towards reality. He didn't believe such a thing could have the value to take away people's futures. He stated that compared to Midas coins, the future was what he truly believed in. However, Jennifer thought this was superfluous because even burning the money could not cause even the slightest harm to the Bank of Midas. The value of the money was derived from so-called credit. As long as the credit of the Bank of Midas remained, it could continue to print money endlessly. She indicated that if Yoga wanted to know something, he had to act quickly. Because this country is already on its way to ruin, Yoga quickly sought out Mikuni upon witnessing the situation. He directly rejected Mikuni's methods, criticizing him for wanting to protect the weak, but at the cost of sacrificing the future generations to save those living in the present. Despite this, Mikuni remained steadfast in his beliefs, arguing that losing the present would mean losing the future as well, questioning if the present isn't for the sake of the future. Just then, a subordinate received news that the financial situation in Singapore was beginning to collapse. Before leaving, Mikuni warned Yoga not to interfere, telling him to wait and see. The economic lifeline symbolized by the golden cakes plummeted, followed by numerous colorful ribbons stretching out neatly on the ground. Due to the financial street in Southeast Asia hitting zero, it led to total bankruptcy, with both people and buildings vanishing, and even Singapore disappearing from the map altogether. As the stock points plummeted, the screen showing Singapore's points vanished completely, along with any related memories. At the same time, major cities in China were severely affected. Not only did the architecture in Hong Kong change, but Shanghai also underwent significant alterations. Stocks continued to fall. Even the Oriental Pearl Tower shrank to half its size. Fortunately, Mikuni had already gathered enough funds to weather the crisis. As Japan's economy began to feel the effects and the stock exchange index nearly hit rock bottom, Mikuni timely utilized his supernatural abilities, vowing to salvage Japan's economy. Japan was to be supported by a major corporation purchasing it. Although Mikuni's efforts finally halted the changes in the cities and the trading index began to recover, only Jennifer saw the reality. Because Mikuni had crossed an untouchable line, and doing so was not without cost. Masakaki informed Mikuni that the settlement would be cleared within the stipulated time. The next second, Mikuni returned to the real world. At the same time, Yoga approached Jennifer. She indicated that although Mikuni stopped the chain reaction, it had caused the nation's GDP to drop by half, even falling to levels similar to the early 1980s. Being able to stop it at this stage also meant that Mikuni had almost exhausted all his resources. Clearly, he had invested a massive amount of Midas money, but this also meant securing current stability at the cost of sacrificing more than a decade of the nation's future. What kind of consequences this would lead to, nobody knew. Then Jennifer shared information about Mashu with Yoga, mentioning that an information broker had seen something similar before and speculated it was related to Yoga's father. Out of curiosity, Yoga then approached the information broker. As a businessman, he clearly possessed a strong sense of awareness and knew exactly what Yoga needed, so he just smirked sleazily, and Yoga had no choice but to obediently transfer $1 million to him. As he looked at the photo handed over by the information broker, not only Yoga, but even Mashu found it hard to believe. However, the broker mentioned that although the person in the photo looked the same, the hair color was black, and the name was also different. Since they looked exactly alike, it must signify something special. Seeing that Yoga really wanted it, the information broker sold it to him at a low price. After this, there was a huge change in Yoga's daily life. When he went out to throw away the trash, the park that was filled with children's laughter just a second ago suddenly turned into a haven for the homeless, with just a shiver. This change puzzled him, and from then on, similar strange events began to occur all over Japan. The population decreased dramatically, disappearing from view. Seeing this, he quickly returned to the store, only to find that even his colleague disappeared right before his eyes. The same happened when he visited his ex-girlfriend's house. She had forgotten his name. He thought this must be the price to pay for being protected by Mikuni now. Yoga found Jennifer and expressed his willingness to do anything to change the current situation, which was exactly what Jennifer wanted to hear. Mikuni had been using illegal means for a long time, and the lives lost previously could no longer be saved. They could only try to save those about to lose their direction, and the country also released disturbing data. This week, the total number of newborns was only 3. Compared to the ongoing trend of low birth rates, this could bring severe consequences to reality. The handsome guy merely pointed casually, and $1 billion appeared instantly in an old lady's bank account. Even in the next second, helicopters began to drop money wildly, and all of Japan received his gratuitous donations. Even the homeless sleeping on the streets got a share of the bounty. However, behind this general joy, a new economic crisis was beginning. Due to the previous disappearance of Singapore, the dollar devalued rapidly by 1.5%, and this hindered America's first national policy to prevent further devaluation of the dollar. G20 countries announced a $500 billion foreign exchange intervention plan, leading financial institutions worldwide to start buying dollars. But this also caused other countries' currency rates to plummet, and even several countries vanished from the world map due to this impact, triggering a chain reaction of backlash, making the 10 years of national fortune that Mikuni had spent a laughing stock. To continue addressing the financial crisis, Mikuni had no choice but to ask Masakaki to print money again. For this, Masakaki demanded new collateral, and the next second, a golden column descended from the sky, connecting with its base and then emitting a continuous flow of black money. The collateral was Japan's future fortune for the next 10 years, so all assets would feel the pain, and the money printed would all converge into Masakaki's hat, finally funneling into Mikuni's account. Meanwhile, Yoga learned about Japan's current situation from Jennifer. She told Yoga all the lost futures were because Mikuni gambled Japan's next 10 years. To stop the operation of the wheel printing machine, the only way was to take away the black card from his hands. Jennifer stated, between creating Midas money and losing the future, there was a few hours gap, and their only chance was to use this interval to propose a transaction with him and make him bankrupt. After obtaining the black card, they could reverse the operation of the money printing machine, returning Midas coins before the settlement, and thus saving the future. Although Yoga immediately felt that hope was slim, Jennifer pointed out that while Mikuni possessed vast assets, he also had a critical weakness. After all, his power was merely due to his wealth. By devaluing the yen, the corresponding value of Midas coins would also decrease, effectively neutralizing his assets and defeating him. The brief time before the settlement was crucial for deciding the outcome. To prevent interference from the guild members, Jennifer tasked Yoga with holding off the guild's people while she confronted Mikuni. The outcome of this battle would determine the future. Meanwhile, Masakaki had completed the asset transfer. However, the man with glasses wanted to monopolize this wealth, but fortunately, he was discovered just in time by the village head. As the two were on the verge of conflict, all the money in the account was instantly wiped out, a tactic of the information broker. He then distributed these funds to the general public, not only magically adding 100 million yen to everyone's account, but also arranging helicopters to scatter money around. After ensuring everyone had a substantial amount of cash in hand, the workforce released news of the yen's devaluation, signaling everyone to exchange it for dollars. At the same time, Yuiga and another person approached the ATM, planning to seize Mikuni's black card. The plan was going smoothly, but Mikuni thought to refuse the trade since he needed to focus his energy on tackling the crisis. Masakaki warned that refusing the trade would cost him half of his fortune, so he had no choice but to confront Jennifer, which was all within Jennifer's expectations. On the other side, Yuiga faced Hori from the guild. Hori was not surprised by Yuiga's betrayal, as he always knew they would eventually confront each other. Despite Hori's superior strength, Mashu suffered immense pain due to the money-printing machine. Overly concerned for Mashu's safety, Yuiga had no choice but to face Hori alone. As Yuiga prepared to use economic magic against Hori, the latter deployed a robot to face Yuiga directly. Clearly outmatched, Yuiga was quickly subdued by the robot's rapid attacks, and Mashu could only watch helplessly as Yuiga was wounded. Hori, lacking honor, delivered a potentially fatal blow before Yuiga could recover. Although Yuiga was eventually knocked down again, Hori's robot was also damaged. Seizing the opportunity, Yuiga stabbed him, causing him pain and rolling on the ground, but Yuiga also suffered from the recoil. Mashu, unable to bear seeing Yuiga sacrifice himself, was deeply moved when Yuiga declared her his treasure and the future. Facing another attack from Hori, Yuiga had no choice but to summon Mashu to fight. Finally, using a burst of ultimate magic, Hori's end came as a pillar of fire descended from the sky. Without a future, Hori couldn't predict his opponent's movements and thus lost the future. However, Mashu also collapsed from exhaustion. Yuiga then had to face his former guide, Mikuni, and hurried to assist Jennifer only to find that Mikuni had already defeated her. In the end, he entrusted his assets to Yuiga. The duel between Yuiga and Mikuni then ensued. Yuiga spoke of the strange phenomena he had experienced recently, trying to awaken Mikuni's conscience. However, Mikuni was indifferent, focused only on resolving the current crisis. At that moment, his subordinate informed him about the events unfolding in Japan, and Mikuni had already guessed the opponent's intentions. They planned to cause severe inflation to counter him, which would lead to the depreciation of the yen and consequently weaken the Midas coins. To break this strategy, Mikuni decided to use the money printing machine again in a do-or-die effort, though it would also mean losing all his future prospects. Yuiga angrily reprimanded him to stop using the future, which reminded him of his former self. However, despite Yuiga's intense protests, they had no effect. He rushed forward to punch Mikuni but was swiftly knocked to the ground. Yuiga didn't have the strength to stop Mikuni, but in the next moment, Masakaki transformed Yuiga's card into a black card. With this, Yuiga now possessed the means to fight Mikuni. Mikuni couldn't understand why Masakaki did this, but Masakaki simply explained it was an order from above. The two were about to face their final showdown, where both unleashed powerful economic magic, but Yuiga was still no match for Mikuni and was quickly overpowered. Mashu immediately came to Yuiga's aid, blocking Mikuni but was struck down in midair. Furthermore, Mikuni's assets began draining Mashu's power, but fortunately, she managed to escape just in time. In exchange, Yuiga summoned the White Wolf. However, despite this, he was still no match for Mikuni and was sent flying. Yuiga was in a desperate situation, unable to do anything but watch his assets being drained. Mikuni was not interested in wasting words and prepared his ultimate move to finish Yuiga. At the critical moment, Yuiga used a skill to narrowly escape. Mikuni expressed his disappointment, hoping Yuiga would take over his position and believing that Yuiga shared his values, but he was mistaken. Seeing Yuiga's resolute gaze, Mikuni ordered Q to use a powerful move, economic blockade vs overheat economy. But Yuiga and Mashu were immobilized just by a gesture. Unable to move, Yuiga kept trying to persuade Mikuni. Faced with Yuiga's preaching, Mikuni angrily used an economic magic sword, which suddenly failed the next second. Mikuni, surprised, couldn't help but remark on how tough Yuiga was. All this was because the yen was no longer accepted worldwide for trading, and the disguise of Midas coins was also coming apart. Thus, Yoga was successfully rescued. Seeing this, Yoga immediately invested 10 billion, catching the opponent off guard, while Mashu confronted Q. On the other side, Yoga and Mikuni engaged in close combat. Mikuni shared his philosophy with Yoga, but Yoga dismissed his words as mere sophistry, determined to protect the people close to him. The two, with differing ideals, continued their fight until Mikuni's attack showed a flaw, which Yoga exploited to finally defeat him. With the yen losing its value, the Midas currency also disappeared, signifying Mikuni's ultimate defeat. Yoga then instructed Masakaki to reverse the operation of the printing machine. In the next second, the black card flew towards the money printing machine and merged with it, allowing Yoga to reclaim his rightful future. Defeated, Mikuni and Q were set to part ways. I understand that continuing the fight won't do you any good. Go where you were meant to go, Mikuni said. At this moment, Mashu also expressed her feelings to Yoga. They embraced each other, grateful for their encounter. In the end, Yoga awoke from the reality he was in. The once vibrant scenes reappeared, with parks filled with children's laughter and joy. Walking on the street, he noticed that the yen had completely disappeared, replaced by transactions in dollars. Yoga was certain that he had successfully preserved the future and took out a photo from his bag. If only I had smiled then.